It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 305. Tonight I'm joined by Ammo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Hi.
Grace.
Hello.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tamriello.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Happy America Days. Do you have your America tree up in preparation?
So that's not even a topic on here, but I feel like that's worth mentioning. America Day is happening in PSO2.
Yup.
And man, do they have a weird interpretation of America.
I mean, were you ready for Anime Hero Uncle Sam?
No.
And car hop, whatever that is.
Yep.
And
recurring quests to go get meat and potatoes for barbecue and potato salad.
I mean, that part's correct.
That part is correct.
and you're going to go fight the military-industrial complex in Las Vegas?
In Las Vegas, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of episode 4, right? They didn't make that for this event.
Yeah, I know. I remember it.
Also 18-wheelers and construction vehicles, and this game is already really weird, and it's just going to get weirder, apparently.
I'm okay with that.
I feel both very seen and very called out.
I mean,
this game.
So Ash and I have both participated a little bit in what's coming in episode 4, and I gotta say,
crazy
this is
weird high school nonsense.
This is nothing compared to what you're going to experience.
Oh boy.
See, but now I have context for it.
Yeah.
I didn't have context for it before. Before it was just, hey, this is weird.
Well, when we were messing with it before, I thought, well, surely this is just a weird translation thing. Or they just directly translated something that maybe shouldn't have been directly translated. No, it's perfectly reasonable.
This all makes sense at some point, is what you're saying?
It makes more sense now than it did.
Yes, but no.
No, it doesn't make sense. So this first topic, I believe, Tam, you threw it on the list. Do you want to ease into it?
Yeah. So there have been a bunch of games that a number of us have been playing recently. PSO2 is one. A few new people have joined us in Guild Wars 2. The one that got me thinking about it was actually Torchlight. But if you're going to play a game with your friends, Torchlight and Dungeon Defenders, if you're going to play a game with your friends, when do you do this? Because a lot of times, if you're into a game enough to evangelize it to other people and get them excited about it, which is cool and definitely a thing that we all do. When do you you can get stuck where it's oh, now I'm permanently ahead, and I anybody who I get into this feels like they're playing catch up or some other weird thing.
Well, and honestly, the other big problem that our group deals with is time zones. That is a serious problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because so often I am logging for the night as the West Coast crew is starting to show up. And Phelan is technically a Central Time person, but because of things that have transpired in his life, he no longer operates on Central Time.
Because of small child.
Small child.
I get to play after he's in bed.
Yeah.
And so all of that sort of conspires for me to be okay, if I'm going to get my friends into something, I really want to make it worth their while. And I especially want to make sure that it's that it's worth it. And so at some point I need to know that it's worth it, but also a lot of games also make it really hard to know when you should do this. Because some games like Torchlight was one that really stood out to me. It's when am I actually supposed to play with my friends versus there's a bunch of stuff that we're doing independently.
And, it comes down to individual people's play styles also, depending on the type of game. I mean, I mentioned this to Tam when people were starting to trickle into Torchlight, that, you know, for a game in that style, my preference is to play through the whole story on my own before I start running around with friends. But this is a weird circumstance because it's technically early access and may or may not have a reset or changes before the full game is finished. So does it matter if I play through the full story? Should I just play with my friends now? I don't know. It was fun once we got it working to run around with friends.
And I love playing through the story of games with friends, but there's so few games that really let you do that in a reasonable way.
Oh, man. We had so much fun with Borderlands, which is a game that would let you do that.
Yeah. And like Borderlands is designed to be like, hey, from the second you boot this game up, you can be playing with your friends.
And should be.
Like, this is what this is built for. Like, whereas like there's a bunch of games like Dungeon Defenders ran into the thing where it's like, well, you should play the tutorial probably, maybe. Like, when is the tutorial done? How do you know?
Yeah. And I mean, like, my natural instinct is sort of along the lines of Grace, that, like, I should group up for group activities, but, like, if I'm just doing story content, I tend to prefer to do that by myself. And, like, one of the experiences that I had years ago was I ended up basically committing myself to a leveling duo in SWTOR. And it was both one of the most enjoyable and also one of the most miserable experiences I've ever had. Like, it was cool because I saw both the Jedi Guardian and the Jedi Consular story all at the same time. And those two stories specifically weave together to make, like, one overarching story. But I also felt like chained to leveling. And the only other time I've done something similar is I ended up running up my warrior in vanilla back in the day with a friend who was running up a priest. And, like, that was largely through necessity because leveling a warrior is hell and leveling a priest is hell. But it also felt like equally shackling because, like, so much of my, I don't know, like, when I'm doing single player content, I mostly just like to piddle around at my own pace. And I always feel like I am holding up the group as a whole or being rushed. As, like, it's one or the two. Like, I either feel like I'm holding up the group or I feel like I'm being rushed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just a weird situation. And, like, there aren't a lot of games that have really good drop-in, drop-out content, too. So when you are basically leveling as a group, you kind of have a pact to stay within each other level-wise. So, like, you almost have to have a separate character to do that with in a lot of games. Like, I will only play this game when we're all on at the same time, or this character when everybody is all on at the same time.
The only experience I have that's even kind of like that was in Secret World, where I believe 4 of us basically leveled together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That, I remember, I don't actually remember that being a huge problem when we did that, but maybe it was.
At the time, that was the only game we were playing.
Ah.
Yeah, it was the only game we were playing. We were all playing it a whole bunch.
Yeah, I mean, that was very true for... That's one of the other things is, like, I don't know that an MMO or even any general live service game is the right place for this, because those games just they last too long. Like, I mentioned it before, but, like, the definitive experience with this for me was Borderlands 1, where it was me and Tam playing this for about 3 days straight, like 18 hours a day.
Yeah, we burned through that entire game.
But it was a really awesome experience, and we had a lot of fun, and then it was done, and we didn't have to, like, try and figure out... It didn't last beyond itself.
And one of the like opposites that stood out to me was we've been playing Guild Wars 2 for years, and we just brought in a friend of ours, and we were like, we've been doing fractals. Can we bring our friend in with us? they're not max level. They've been playing for like a week, and it turns out actually, yeah. And it worked, and it was fun. And it was like, it was a legitimate shock to me that we even could do that, much less be reasonably successful and not have it feel miserable. But it was like, he was like, oh, I can't really do that much damage, but I can run interference and I can help out with the non-damage parts of these dungeons. And like, because there was a lot of that, it worked.
Yeah, I mean, that was my question is, yes, you can do things together, but is it fun for the person who's behind? Because I've been that person in a lot of circumstances. It's a big part of why I'm not jumping into Guild Wars 2. But, you know, I went through this. I think the worst was probably Monster Hunter World, where I just jumped in so late that I could do things together, but it wasn't really fun.
Yeah.
Well, and another example of that is, you know, anytime we drag someone along with us in Diablo, like, it's a real miserable experience until you get caught up. But the problem with that is, like, in truth, there's never really a catch-up point if you're behind, because, like, there will always be, like, a Paragon level difference between the two. But like, you get used to it over time. But yeah, like, for somebody who's not used to the grind, it could be a miserable experience.
Yeah, I mean, the Paragon thing, I feel like is fairly minor in terms of what you can get, at least during seasonal play. Yeah. Non-seasonal play is a whole different beast, but at least the miserable part of getting someone leveled and caught up in that game is a matter of less than an hour. Yeah. It's like, it's a few riffs. They will go super fast, and then you'll be max level and you can do whatever you want and feel like you're mostly contributing. And that's a big difference than, you know, some other more MMO style games where, man, when you're behind, and you're just going to be behind for a long time.
And it's really interesting. Like, Guild Wars 2 has been this kind of, it's been sort of interesting to explore that, because in a similar vein, it's like, okay, it's got 80 levels to work with. And at some point they realized that that's a problem. And we're like, all right, if you pay money for our game, basically, we'll give you a free level 80 boost, which sounds terrible, except that it doesn't actually stop you from doing anything because the whole game scales. So it lets you, it does so much good scaling that you can jump in and do stuff with your friends, and progression is super horizontal.
Right. I mean, because that's basically the situation I'm in right now, is where I think I have kind of decided that I like the Reaver better than the Warrior, and I've done nothing on the Reaver, but it's level 80.
Yeah.
But I also, like, basically need to now go back through all the rest of the game, that even though I'm max level and even though I have all the gear I will ever need, like, there's still, you know, zones and zones and zones worth of content that I'm slowly doing.
And it's worth your time to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I can run around.
I mean, somewhat. I guess I don't feel like doing zones for completion is worth a terrible lot in alternate characters.
I don't honestly see what doing zones for completion is worth, honestly.
I mean, there's the XP on your mastery track. There's zone rewards.
Zone rewards. There's
collections.
Exploration. There's collections. There's...
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things to do in these zones, but the actual going around and completing every heart, things like that.
But there's still, you don't necessarily need to go around and just go complete every heart unless you're working on world complete.
Yeah, I feel like that's a thing that you just, you know, you do stuff as you run into it for whatever goal you currently have. And if you eventually, you know, have a goal that needs a zone completion, then you go complete a zone. But
yeah, I never got world complete, so that's mostly why I'm doing this.
I only got world complete recently. Well, it was interesting. I got world complete on a character that isn't my main anymore, and it benefit my main.
Yeah.
Like, that's the other thing is that, and I I get the impression that Diablo seasonal play is kind of the same way, where you're kind of building up, no matter what you're playing, you're kind of building up your account's progress.
Yeah, that's I think a fair comparison.
Within a season, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, but after the season's over, everything you earned from that season collapses down into your main account.
Right, but do you ever play non-seasonal characters anymore?
No.
Yes,
but
yes, I do.
Okay.
I don't really, but so I do on the Switch, okay? But like my Paragon is just continuing to slowly skyrocket from playing seasonal characters. And eventually it will cap, but I'm nowhere near the cap. I don't even remember what the cap is. It's a really high number.
I didn't know there was a hard cap.
Yeah, there's an eventual Paragon cap. I just don't know what it is. I want to say it's like 3,000, 4,000, something like that.
Apparently it went away a year ago.
Oh, really? So there is no cap anymore?
Oh. And yeah, and that's similar, like the Guild Wars 2 comparison is it's like I'm working on a long grind for this mount, for example, and it's getting me I've actually been doing it on about 4 different characters, and it's going to benefit all of them when I'm done. And when I'm playing with a friend who just started new, I can play on my max level character and run around with them, and it's worth both of our time. And like that's a fun feeling. Even if what I'm doing is I'm doing something for my main, I'm doing something on a character that isn't my main to benefit my main later. Like we were running around, like when we went and did those dungeons, I was playing something that I hadn't really put, like it wasn't really like the main thing that I played, but because I was playing it to fill a role, but that's fine because it's still benefiting everybody, every character on my account. And so it was like, it reduced that barrier to get into playing with a friend, because it wasn't like, well, do I have something around this level that I also want to play? It was like, no, I'll just play whatever I want. And it's a really, really smooth entry. And considering, like we were talking about it at the start, like how hard it is to get people together and play, I really value that. Like, yes, we can just do that.
Yeah.
You know, it's rare that I can play the same game at the same level with a whole bunch of different people who have completely different levels of investment.
Yeah, I really enjoy that game also for its ability to just, like, everyone does feel like they're getting a reward. The game's progression is hard to wrap your head around if you're used to, like, more standard forms of progression, though.
Yeah, there's not the... It doesn't really do the continually grind for ever bigger numbers, except unless you count like bigger numbers in here's the breadth of options I have and the various things I can make happen and so on.
I mean, if you really want to grind for bigger numbers, there's your achievement point total.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But you don't want to grind for that number.
I mean, increasing that unlocks some skins and gets you percentage.
You don't want to grind for that number.
No, you want to set yourself reasonable goals, and in the process of achieving those goals, your achievement number will go up on its own. Because basically every goal you can set for yourself in Guild Wars 2 has achievements linked to it.
Oh yes,
that's true.
Well, and that's kind of like the, you know, Grace mentioned sort of being leery of hopping in at what feels like a late stage. And I guarantee you there's stuff that I haven't done that like would be neat to pop into. And I think that even in the MMOs that do this really well, like I've always held up FF14 as a game that does a really good job of bribing you to do lower level content. But like there's stuff that I haven't even done. What's like, you know, people be like, "Hey, I found this item. What is this item for?" And I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah,
like I should know.
Something that I've got to Google.
Yeah, I should know, but there's so many things. Because it's like massively horizontal progression. Like there's so many things that I have no idea about.
Well, like today, Ash and I were talking about how our inventory was getting clogged with these resources that are account bound, non-tradable, that we don't really have any immediate use for, that you get in the process of doing stuff in the Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire zones. Well, there are converter items that you can get through various methods that allow you to basically feed some of these resources to it for a bag of random stuff. I have one that is a little bug named Princess that I can feed Dragonite ore to, and it poops out, bags of mostly junk, but occasionally you get something good out of it. And I got that one by running around the human city and shooting bugs off of walls. And there was an achievement for that. I did that forever ago. And so it occurred to us there's probably converters for these things too. So we went and looked, and sure enough, there are. And some of them are kind of madness to get, but a couple of them were, it turns out, real easy. So I went and got one by filling out a collection in one of the Heart of Thorns zones, and that got me a converter that I could feed some stuff to. And then Ash was looking and realized that there was another one for just tracking down a whole bunch of story tablets in a zone that he knows real well. I don't know quite as well. So we went and did that too. And so, that was a goal we didn't even have at the beginning of the day-to-day, that we identified, realized, yeah, we can do this, knock it out in a couple hours. And there's this kid is just full of stuff like that.
Yeah, we were having a conversation. We were having a conversation with our friend who started, and I don't remember what exactly it was, but he was like, "Hey, what's this thing?" I don't know. What is that thing? And none of us knew. He'd been playing for 3 hours and found something that we hadn't seen, and it was cool. It was like, "Hey, here's a whole new thing that I had never seen." I think Ash had seen, but I'd never seen. I didn't know anything about, and it's neat to have that. Hey, there's, even as a new player, you can find cool stuff that it isn't oh, your friend's oh yeah, I know that, you'll like it. It's oh no, this is a thing that I don't even know about.
I am very curious. Ash, were you messing with me when you were pretending you don't know what the glowy weird guy is?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a zone event that happens every so often.
No, that can't.
No, that's what I thought too.
I think it is related to that. I think it went in. I think it is leyline related.
The dude that just shows up, yeah, I think he's a precursor, and it shows up 30 minutes, 40 minutes ahead of when the other event starts.
Well, no, Kodra saw him.
I was seeing him in a fractal.
Yeah.
It's this random glowy dude that will show up. Why? I don't know. But I do think it's related to the leyline stuff, because it's the same sort of. It's because the giant glowy leyline dude is the same model, just much bigger. And just in any of the zones, he'll just show up periodically. He'll just be walking along, and there'll be that dude. And I don't know, then a few minutes later, I see the ley lines event starting. So the one that you see just in random old world zones, I think is tied to the ley line event.
Yeah, that's not what I was saying.
Yeah, there's entire quest lines that I just haven't. I don't even know existed because. And I feel like that's part of the operative thing is if you're gonna get a new player playing, it's not simply enough that you can jump in and participate. Like how Grace was saying, being carried doesn't feel good. But also it's you need to have something where it's oh hey, I can also discover new things. I'm a contributor, I'm a contributor in more than just being a body. And it's kind of when can you do that? Games let you. It's something that I want to see. I want to see more of. I want to see games, because Bella's been talking about Destiny, and one of the things that I remember about Destiny is when I come back to Destiny, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do.
Well, and that's even gotten worse right now, because so there's a precursor thing going on that's associated with the expansion from September, or the one coming in September. And like, when you first log in, no matter where you were in the game, you are suddenly thrust into this story mission that doesn't connect up to like most of anything that you've experienced up to that point. So it feels real jarring to like, the darkness is attacking. Okay, so like now I'm going to throw you into this story mission about the darkness, but you may not even know what that is.
I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to attack it with magic missile.
You do attack the darkness with magic missile.
So I've seen some comics about this. Is the darkness actually pretty cool and your friend and everyone likes it now?
Oh, man.
And wants you to carry balls.
I mean, it gives you
Because, man, we love
presents.
carrying balls.
It does give you presents. Like you go collect this seed that allows the darkness to talk to you, which isn't at all a bad idea. So in this story mission, you're basically trying to talk to the darkness, and it tells you don't need weapons, and it basically like tractor pulls you into the ship, kind of like what happens in another mission, and you suddenly get interrupted, and you're in a taken area, because Savathun is basically trying to stop you from communing with the darkness, and we don't know why yet. But Savathun does not want you to talk to the darkness.
That implies that maybe talking to the darkness is a good idea.
Right, because like the Hive has been using the darkness for all of their powers.
I mean, that implies that talking to the darkness is a bad idea.
I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I basically, from what I can tell, we're heading towards having mastery over both the darkness and the light.
That sounds like it's definitely going to end well.
Yeah, I mean, because I think we're going to get entirely new classes that are darkness-based in addition to the light-based classes.
Yeah, I think they were calling it stasis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems fine. Can't see what could go wrong here.
But, yeah, I mean... But that, like... So Shiana is back playing Destiny 2, and Werewolf is back playing Destiny 2, and they both experienced this jarring thing of logging in to characters they had not played in forever and basically being forced into playing a story mission, which is fine, I guess.
Definitely jarring, though.
Yeah,
Right,
it would be.
But so, back on the Guild Wars 2 thing, like, one of the things the game does extremely well is exploration, I think. Because, like, the world is multi-tiered, and, like, to get 100% zone completion, it's actually a challenge to do, because, like, you have to basically explore the whole zone. And there's a lot of zone.
Yep.
There's a lot of zone.
And just because, like, you don't see something doesn't mean that, like, it's not there, because you might not be able to see it until you're, like, down at the actual level of it.
My personal experience is that zone completing the original zones is kind of long, but not that difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And zone completing any zone added since Heart of Thorns is extremely difficult, although some of them are not very long.
Yeah, because the original zones were built before we had gliders and mounts. So there's a limit to, how much that they can expect you to do as far as vertical travel. And then came Heart of Thorns, and they gave us gliders, and they decided that they needed to make sure we used them a lot.
Yes.
And then came Path of Fire, and they gave us mounts, and you have to use them a lot.
I mean, mounts let you go up from a standing position, which gliders do not do.
Yep.
I guess that's true. So mounts do give you a lot more verticality and a lot more decision over how you traverse a zone, whereas you're actively being forced on paths.
Yeah, there is, like, getting around Heart of Thorns zones is noticeably easier once you have mounts from Path of Fire, like the Springer in particular. That's part of why Ash and I were able to complete that achievement as quickly as we did, because, like, there were a couple of things that to get to, we normally would have had to go around a long way, and we were able to just, pull out our bunny rabbit mounts and hop straight up. But this does mean that there's lots of places, especially in the original zones, that if they haven't turned the ability to use mounts off there, like, you can just completely skip jumping puzzles occasionally and go straight to the reward at the end. That said, you are already capable of doing this if there was a friendly Mesmer around. So,
Yeah, I greatly appreciate Mesmers that hang out at the jumping puzzles on the days they're part of the daily and yoink people up to the top.
I just had a random Mesmer today provide that service to me, run a jumping puzzle that wasn't even part of any daily or anything. They just happened to be there, and they're like, hey, you want to board up? I'm like, gladly, thank you.
I'm convinced there's like some tourist guild or something. It's all the Mesmers that do this thing. Because like you encounter them all over the freaking place.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I'm
fun to do as a Mesmer. I've done it.
I don't love jumping puzzles.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who don't. But
Game has a lot of them.
if you have a Mesmer who is happy to help, then you can just be like, nah, I'm not going to do this one.
Oh, I've mentioned this briefly to Tam, but turns out thieves can do this now. The capacity is significantly more limited, but the range is not.
Nice.
So if you're a little patient, a thief can do it as well. I mean, their cooldown is also way shorter to make up for the lower capacity.
So next thing on the list, I think, is also a repeat from last week. I assume this is a Kodra topic.
It is a Kodra topic. I have been playing so much Sudoku. So So there was a YouTube video that managed to go viral and come across my feed as a result of a channel called Cracking the Cryptic. And in it, a guy is doing a Sudoku with basically only two given numbers. And it's a Sudoku that has a bunch of additional constraints because you couldn't normally do a Sudoku with only two given numbers unless you have a lot of things constraining where you can place numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But it introduced me to the world of Sudoku puzzles that generally always follow standard Sudoku rules, but then have other ways of giving you clues or constraining the board that lead to new ways of like looking at the logic. And so these guys do 2 videos a day where they take some puzzle and walk you through how to solve it. And they always put it in a software that lets you go to their site and try and do it yourself. And so mostly I have been taking those things and trying to solve the puzzles myself. And it's been really fun. Learning a lot from this and like different ways of looking at the puzzles and trying to solve them and sort of learning the patterns of the various constraints. Right now they're doing a special puzzle hunt in which they have given a series of 8 different puzzles that all feed into each other. So you have to figure out the order and then solve them in order. And each puzzle gives you a new number to place in the next puzzle. But it's been fun. The people who create these are very, very clever. I was telling Tam, one of the puzzles I had today, one of the key constraint was each row of the puzzle had to feature a date in consecutive order. And so if you think about it, that's very difficult to do in Sudoku because you can't have any repeated digits in your date and you can't have any zeros in your date. And after sort of thinking about it, there's really only one sequence of dates that is 9 long that fits, and it's August 31st to September 8th. And I spent 15 minutes looking at this puzzle, trying to figure out how it made any sort of sense. Until I realized that I was thinking like an American and putting the month before the day, and the problem required you to put the day before the month. I don't know. It's a fun thing that gives me that like daily challenge to chew across. And if I do ever get stuck, there's somebody there who is going to do a video showing themselves solving the puzzle. And so I can see what pieces of logic I missed and how I can get better for the next day, which I've enjoyed this. So
I was mostly with you on your descriptions of these previously until you started talking about Snake Sudoku.
Snake Sudoku? Where you... Okay, so yeah, that's a fun one. That's actually... So the current puzzle is Harry Potter themed, and you are going through puzzles that are shaped like the various Horcruxes from Harry Potter, and the final thing you have to destroy is a snake Sudoku, which is... So in a snake Sudoku, what you do is you have a start and an end to a snake. And you have to draw a snake in the 9x9 grid, and the snake can never touch itself orthogonally, only diagonally. The empty regions that the snake leaves behind when it touches itself diagonally have to be 8 regions, and they are of size 1, size 2, size 3, size 4, size 5, size 6, size 7, and size 8. And then inside of those regions, you have to be able to place the numbers 1 through 8, depending on how big that region is. Which is very fun because it requires you to solve 2 puzzles at once. But the puzzles influence each other. So like one of the things you figure out very quickly is if you ever manage to place a snake tile over a 1, well, that's great because now you know every other 1 you find is in an open space. If you ever manage to uncover where a 9 is, you know that is always going to be a snake, a part of a snake tile. If you ever manage to figure out where the size 8 box is, well, then you know any 8s you find are now part of the snake. So you're going back and forth and solving 2 puzzles like simultaneously, but they keep informing each other with information as you solve them. I would say if this type of stuff sounds interesting to you, you can check out Cracking the Cryptic either on YouTube, or they do have some games on Steam that you can play, which are they have their classic Sudoku and 3 of their more popular variants, which is chess Sudoku, which is like Sudoku, but numbers cannot be various chess moves apart. And then sandwich Sudoku, where instead of numbers being given on the grids, numbers are placed around the outside of the grid that tell you the sum of digits between the 1 and the 9 in that row or column. And then thermometer Sudoku, which places a bunch of thermometers on the board and requires you to go from low to high inside of the thermometer.
I can't help but feel like it sounds like we have reached the upper limit of how difficult Sudoku puzzles can be, and so now we're going down rabbit holes.
There's definitely, we've reached the upper limit of how difficult Sudoku puzzles can be. Like, there are, like, when you do their classic Sudoku app, one of the things I like a lot about it is they will provide hints which tell you what you should be looking for to solve the given puzzle. And, like, there are various pencil mark formations that will allow you to eliminate various possibilities. And they go up to, like, a very complicated series of logic where if you unwind it, you can know, like, 3s are either going to be in this formation, but it eliminates a bunch of stuff. They also talk about, like, how to spot X-wings, how to spot Y-wings, which are different constructions. I actually don't like classic Sudoku as much. I'm finding these a lot more interesting because people have a lot more freedom to come up with new ways of presenting logic. There was a really clever puzzle the other day where you were trying to... They sort of, like, would create boundaries, and you tried to place lights on the board such that every spot was illuminated, but no light was illuminated by another light. And then numbers that were in the light bulbs were a certain value. Numbers that were in the walls were a certain value based on how many lights touched them. Again, I really like the ones that require you to solve 2 different puzzles at the same time.
Okay, so this next topic, it appears to be a Grace topic.
It is. I have a topic for a change.
Yay!
So and it may tie back in a little bit to some of our previous discussions too, but since I got my Switch, which I'm very excited about, I've been buying a few games and mostly trying to budget myself so that I don't go overboard since I just laid out a bunch of money for the console. And so buying some really cheap indie games and some other games that just happen to be on sale, so they're relatively cheap. And playing through them, trying to figure out like what constitutes getting my money's worth out of a game. And it's really different depending on the type of game and what amount I paid for it. And I find it very interesting. So, for instance, I bought FF7 Remake, and I still have barely touched it. And I would say I definitely did not get my money's worth out of that. And maybe I'll play it eventually, but that was a poor choice for the gamer I am now, as opposed to the gamer I was when I originally played FF7. But I played a little adorable indie game that was in sort of a Game Boy art style and had adorable little squids, and it took me, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes to finish the entire game, but it cost 50 cents, and it was a bargain at quadruple the price, frankly. It was very charming.
I love those.
So I've just been trying to wrap my head around, when is a game satisfying enough? And, there's a whole other discussion to be had about the price points of games. And so maybe getting your money's worth isn't exactly the right phrase here, but just being satisfied with the money and the time invested into something.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Yeah, like I know that in my case, there's stuff that like there are some games that I've spent like $120 on for like the fancy collector's edition, and I would gladly do it again because I loved it. And there are games that I've spent like $5 on that I was like, that was a waste of $5. So it's not really about the like raw amount of money. I mean, it's a little bit about that, but that's not the only thing.
Exactly.
And yeah, I completely agree that it's like the kind of game makes a huge difference. It's like, what are my expectations almost?
Yeah, I mean, even free-to-play games, I broke down a little while ago and installed PSO2 and played it for a little bit, and frankly, probably that was a waste for me. I mean, I had a little bit of fun hanging out with Belle, but mostly it was pretty clear that this is not going to be a worthwhile use of my time. But it didn't feel as disappointing because, I had only invested a small amount of time and $0 in it. So it's kind of a wash. But other times, if I try investing a bunch of time in, a new MMO or, something that I pick up because everyone else is playing and it sounds like it would be fun, and then I invest a bunch of time and never clicks, then that feels very bad. And there's no way to know ahead of time. And I think I have such a hang up about it because I spent so long as, a starving grad student, was really, really conscious of what my discretionary spending was for things like games. And it feels very different now that I have a big boy salary to spend a few bucks here or there on a game and see what sticks. It's just not something I had access to before.
It's interesting because I have from a different standpoint, I've got I come to it from when I was in game dev, and felt like I needed to play like at least every major release just to stay current on my work. And it was very much about time budgeting, where it was less monetary budget, but I was still making like, was this worth my time? Was this worth my like different resource investment, but still like, was it worth it? Did I get my time's worth?
Right.
And it's like, it's one of those places where I developed the like intense distaste for almost any kind of grind. See also on Courage. But like, when do I feel like I got that it was worth it?
Well, and I think like some of it too has like, there's a bunch of variables that make up whether or not it's worth your time. Because like, okay, so Witcher 3, for example, I sat on that for years. I mean, I've had a copy of it. I got it when I got a video card. And it took me forever to play it. And now it's one of the funnest games I've played, period. But I also know, like, I can't handle a game like that every month because, like, that was so all-time consuming while I was playing it. And it was, like, 120 hours of play. So, like, just from a simple standpoint of, like, I don't have 120 hours to devote on the regular to play something like that. It's like, yeah, sure, I love Mass Effect, and I would love to replay Mass Effect, but, like, that's 200 hours to replay the whole thing. Like, if you play it the way that I play it, like, I don't have time for that.
Yeah. And I think that's part of why, some of the big AAA games I end up bouncing. Like, I mean, FF7 Remake is a perfect textbook example of this for me, where I start playing it and it doesn't fully click, but I'm not having a bad time. But I look at it and I see the amount of hours that it's going to take up sort of laid out in front of me, and I just bounce. I can't quite bring myself to do it. And, and I'm a person who will spend a not insignificant number of hours doing stupid things in, Diablo for ad nauseum, but it's sort of in pieces, in small chunklets on my terms, as opposed to I am going to have to invest X number of hours to experience the full experience of something.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, like, for me, that's one of the decision points that often happens is like, okay, well, I have this amount of time. Do I start a new story that I will effectively need to play as my primary game for a while to get the most benefit out of it? Or do I return to one of the online worlds that I have already invested a bunch of time in, and additional time will get me some benefit, like long term? Or, do I mostly just play single player games? And I, around the beginning of this year, I had a kick of playing a ton of single player games. It was really fun, but also, like, I felt like I was falling behind in the online games that I was playing too at the same time.
I have a thing that I have a habit that I've gotten into, and it's been interesting to see this play out because it sort of happened organically. I have a tendency to pick up a new game that I'm really into and just like get obsessed with it. And right around the time I was playing Persona 5, what I realized was going on was I was spending enough time in the game that was like affecting other things that I would do. I would be like, oh, I can duck out of work an hour early and play, and like stuff that I really shouldn't do. And so what I do now is it's like, and what I did with like FF7, for example, was I was like, I'm going to take a long weekend. I'm going to binge the absolute everything out of this game over the weekend and see where I'm at. And either I finish it in the weekend or I probably don't finish it unless I'm like really close, but that's relatively rare. And it's been interesting because there's been a number of games where it's like, all right, I pick up this game, it's new, I play it. I tear through it in like one major, this is my weekend sitting, because I can do that. If I do that over a weekend and like just block that time out for myself, as long as I'm done after the weekend, it doesn't feel like I'm missing out on other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like when I was single, I could do that thing, but like that is not a thing you can do
Yeah.
for longer than like a few hours at a time.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of the things that I deeply appreciate about the person I'm seeing at the moment is that she's like, oh, that's cool. Like, I'll hang out and read a book. As long as it's not like a thing you're doing every week, that's fine. It's like about one. And I'm like, yeah, it's games that I want to do that with don't come out that often. It's like once a season maybe is a game where I feel that strongly about. And, you know, it works out, or has worked out thus far.
Yeah.
I'm kind of basically doing that this weekend because my wife went to visit her mother, and took our son with her, so I had the house to myself. I can do what I want.
Yeah, I used to do this
nice.
when my wife would go to grade AP exams. Because like I'd be by myself for a period of time while she's in another state. And a lot of times I would end up replaying an older game or something like that, or play something new.
Yeah, this is definitely, I would do this when I was in school and I had school breaks and my spouse was still working. So I would have a couple days for spring break or something for myself and could do something silly like that.
And it's interesting for me, knowing that it's like this big chunk of time that I'm blocking out the same way that I might like go to a convention or something, it becomes like, it means that I have like the spare cycle all of the rest of the time. It's like I get it all out at once.
But I also find that a lot of the games like that take longer than that chunk of time for me to complete, even when I'm playing them that intensely. I'm just not that fast getting through things.
Yeah,
I'm likewise very slow at games in general.
And I think that's
I was going to say, like, I spent a full weekend and some change playing Fallen Order, and I got through 2-3 planets, and like I feel like I'm nowhere near the end, and I've not returned to it. And the problem is like if I can't do it in the one dedicated session, it takes me forever to return to it to actually finish it off.
Yep, same, absolutely same. No, definitely agreed. Like there's games that I don't get through in that first weekend, and pretty much I never return to. But like, and part of it is I have gotten, see previous comment about feeling like I have to play. At one point, I was playing about 20 games a month. You know, I was playing games about the same rate that like game reviewers on game sites play them. And so I got really, really fast at like, I'm beelining this thing. And so I play it really fast, but I'm not sure it was like the best option.
Yeah,
It did destroy any like, I mean, that and a bunch of other games, like kind of, I am no longer remotely a completionist.
During the summer, my wife goes on these like reading stints, and she'll read 2, sometimes 3 books a day. And like, I just, like I can't, like that doesn't seem like that's enjoyable.
Oh, I if I've got the right books, I'll do the same thing. I'll like hyper focus and just like, my brain really, really loves that. I'm going to hyper focus on something and get it all done. I'm going to paint 50 minis today, or I'm going to go on vacation for a week and write 300 pages of something or whatever. And I don't get to do that very often.
I think that like that goes back to, I think why I play so many online games is like I can visit them in a bunch of smaller sessions, and there's persistence that doesn't go away. So it feels like, oh, so that time spent like is something that I can revisit later.
Yeah.
But it's so unpredictable what is going to feel valuable. Because like, okay, so Return to the Obra Dinn, like that is one of the most enjoyable weekends I had playing a game. And it was basically like a day and a half to get through all of it.
Yeah. And I remember wondering what was wrong with me as I was trying to play that game and like not enjoying it.
Well, and like so many of you love the Persona series, and I just cannot get into that. Like I've tried. Like recently I picked it up on the PC thinking, well, maybe if it's on my platform of choice, like I will enjoy it more. And yeah, no, not really. Like I think it's just a game that is not for me.
Yeah, and I struggle mightily with gravitating towards games that past me would have really loved and that current me does not actually like or have time for or doesn't want to bother with. But I keep trying. I keep throwing myself at them and then going, no.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, this would have been great, but right now, I don't actually really like this anymore, and it's really hard to get my brain to register that.
I catch myself playing a lot of games that I have like would normally not have any interest in, just because like, hey, maybe it's an opportunity to play a game with people, because I put so much value on like playing games with my friends that like I'll often play games that I would under no circumstances otherwise play.
Yeah, I wish there was a moment where I felt like we were sort of releasing a lot more shorter game experiences. And I don't know if even those short game experiences have become too long for me, but it feels like games have gotten longer. Like they've crept up in the amount of time it takes to beat them.
Oh, that's interesting. I have the opposite thing where I feel like it's harder and harder for me to find a game that I can really sink my teeth into.
I mean, what kind of games are you talking about here?
I'm mostly talking about...
a lot of the big AAA experiences have gotten longer.
I was going to say, I'm talking mostly about, like, yeah, the big AAA experiences.
Yeah, I mean, because like everything...
I don't care about Red Dead Redemption 2, but that game is huge.
Well, and like, I think I want to play it, but I know it's so big, so it's kind of daunting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, I am interested in Red Dead, but boy, that's a lot of game.
Well, and like Cyberpunk, like, okay, that is going to be a longer game than Witcher 3 was, based on what I have heard. And Witcher 3 is a massive game. It is a massive game. So, like, I know I will be playing it, but, man, like, I know it will take a significant amount of time. And the other problem that I have is, like, okay, so we talked about America Day in PSO2. One of the things that I'm slowly starting to detest is holidays in games.
Mm-hmm.
Only because they all land at the same time. And you're on this really tight schedule, and it basically demands you to only play that one game. If you want to, like Final Fantasy 14 holidays are usually pretty chill, and there's not.
Maybe that's because they ask you to do one thing that takes like an hour and a half, maybe.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like there's not much of a repeating farming aspect to it, but like a lot of these holidays are deeply farmable events. Like the thing that's happening in Guild Wars 2 right now. Like I've not even attempted to start it because I've been doing other things, but like in theory, it would be beneficial for people to farm that thing. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff you can get from it.
I mean, in theory, but in reality, I don't know. Their approach to holiday rewards is always kind of weird to me, and that a lot of the best stuff is given out basically completely randomly.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, one of the things this year is given out as just an achievement reward for doing the daily 5 times over the entire course of the event.
Yep. It is a repeatable achievement, so you can get, multiple of the choices if you want. But yeah, you can get a cool holographic weapon of whatever type you like. You can also get some holographic shoulders for a little bit more investment.
And spend taffy, I think, to buy the holographic helmet from last year.
Probably.
Yeah, but that's an unreasonable. The price of that is unreasonably high. while it is possible to earn it, I think it's 20 jawbreakers or something?
That is a lot. That's definitely a throw gold at the problem. If you have a lot of money, and otherwise maybe just don't do this thing.
They probably don't do this thing.
I mean, that's your other option is, if you want to make some money, this is an opportunity to make a lot of money because there are absolutely people with a lot of gold who want to buy your holiday coffers. Like, the price has gone down from what it was, but I think it's still around 20 silver per.
I didn't realize those weren't account bound.
They are not.
Huh. That is definitely a money-making opportunity in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm that person with money.
Man, I feel bad that Final Fantasy XIV no longer lets you do this, because that used to be a great way of making money.
Oh, yes.
Farming up a bunch of the holiday stuff.
Oh, yeah. I definitely made a nice seed selling cherry trees.
Again, cherry trees financed our first guild house.
Cherry trees financed both of our guild houses.
I mean, also Adventurer Need financed a decent chunk of our second guild house.
Also true.
Okay, so we have a Guild Wars 1 topic on here, but I don't know how long of a topic it's going to be. And I know technically we got a little bit of a late start, but I don't know how late of a start. So we will probably talk about it some other week.
The discussion is about how Guild Wars 1's ability system, which is not shared by Guild Wars 2, is one of the best things in any MMO ever, or any game ever.
Oh, man. So I will say that this was the course of like a very vocal parting of ways between me and another blogger.
Oh.
Because he found out I was in the alpha program, and he needled me for information. And he wanted to know what cards were available for what classes, and because he was a hardcore Guild Wars 1 player. And I was like, there are no cards. Like, your abilities are associated with your weapons. And like, there's some abilities that you have, but it's not the kind of abilities that you had in Guild Wars 1. And he blocked me from everything, and I'm still blocked, and said I was a notorious liar.
What?
And he did not want to believe what I was saying. And like, the irony of this situation is, after the game came out, like, he was pissed at Guild Wars 2 because Guild Wars 2 was exactly like I described.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, my.
Notorious liar? Belgast? Really?
I don't know. Like,
where did this come from?
That was specifically like, so I talked to him one day, and then all of a sudden, like, I'm blocked on everything. And there's a friend that I'm still friends with, like, that I was like, is so-and-so still on the internet? Because, like, I can't see any of his accounts. Or he was like, oh, yeah, he blocked you. I'm like, why did he block you? He said you were a notorious liar. Well, okay, whatever.
That's definitely what I think of when I think of you, Belle.
Clearly.
Somebody
Yeah.
entirely capable of lying with a straight face in any way at all. Yeah, sure.
But yeah, it was just the weirdest thing. And like, I'm like, yeah. So then I after the game released, like, I asked this other friend, so what's he think? He goes, he hates it. Can't stand that there's not a card-based system. I'm like, well, that was kind of what I told him. Like, I was trying to do
it was a good system.
It was a good system.
Like, I was trying to tell him on the down low, but then he was demanding like screenshots and stuff. And I'm like, I am not going that far to break the NDA. Also, I resigned from the alpha at this point already. Like, I no longer have access to get it to anything. Because like Guild Wars 2 was like a game I legitimately resigned from the alpha because, like, might as well give my slot to somebody else because, like, this was not for me.
It's been fascinating as my tastes have changed, how my opinion of the game has changed.
I mean, there's that. There's the bit where my understanding of what the game is doing has changed.
Yeah.
Also that.
I don't know. Like, I go back and forth. Like, I really like the casual content in the game. I find it really enjoyable. I do not like how squishy I feel and the fact that I can't be a tank. Like this game's version of a tank is different than a real tank to me. Like I am way the hell tankier than any of y'all. Like we found that out the other day. But like it still doesn't feel tanky to me.
We've made some additional discoveries since that day.
We have.
Maybe with a healer it would feel different, but
oh my goodness.
That's one of the discoveries.
Yeah, it turns out that playing a game without playing even Guild Wars 2 without having a healer is kind of important. Made a big difference.
Like, one, having a healer is a thing you can do. Two, it is possible to build way more defensively than any of us were previously encouraged to.
Well, I know my mace and shield build is really defensive.
Not just weapon choice, and gear choice as well.
Gear matters a lot.
Like, all the advice we got previously was, hey, just use Berserker. Just use this gear that has no health, no toughness on it whatsoever.
Oh, yeah, no, so my
perfectly
gear
fine.
had health and toughness on it. Like, I just can't not have toughness and health.
But, anyway, Guild Wars 1 was kind of interesting, but we're going kind of long, so I think we can talk about it next time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully you enjoy the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.